this computer. Okay, so welcome to the first 2021 Boston AWS meetup. I'm Brian Tarbox, and I'm one of the organizers, and Jen and Ken are the other co-organizers. Could not do it without them. And let's see, since reInvent didn't happen this year, I'm wearing a replay shirt from past years, although I discovered after the fact that it's got a hole in it. But I also am sporting an actual reInvent 2020 hoodie, which are these are rare. They gave them out as special swag or to heroes. So let's see. We're going to do our regular sets of announcements, and then we're going to do our TLDR. And this is special because having been in the field for 400 years, I finally figured out what TLDR actually stood for. Oh my gosh. And my boss just joined the meeting, so everyone be nice. So let's see. We generally start off with, is anyone's company have jobs that they're looking for people? And please just jump in and announce them, but also put them in the chat. So anyone's company hiring?
Yeah, Elevation Education's hiring.
Yeah, we're not quite hiring, but we will probably soon. We're called Third Iron. We work on academic journal stuff.
Excellent. You guys can say more than 2 words. You can say.
I didn't know what standard was.
Give us a sentence or two. You know, you're looking for marketers or C coders, or who all you're looking for.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, so we're looking for engineers, and let's see, I'll post the careers link in the webpage. But yeah, we do. We basically develop software for English language learner programs in K-12 school districts.
Cool.
Also, I just posted the. Just quick note in the chat. I posted a link to our Slack, so please join that. And also, if you have jobs, if you could put it in the hashtag jobs channel, that would be awesome, as well as into the chat here, just to get more exposure.
Great. And Third Iron, we make software. We're looking for software developers, generally more on the back end, but it's JavaScript, Node.js. And you could have some opportunities developing front end stuff too, Node.js, Postgres, and a variety of other fun technologies. And we make it easier for researchers to get to their academic peer-reviewed journal content and wherever they happen to be. So we have a lot of customers in Boston at universities, private companies, government organizations, and hospitals, as well as all around the world. I put that in the link, and I'll join that Slack too.
All right. Anyone else? And I got to let the dog out, or else she'll whine all day.
Well, Brian does that. I'm Dan Nelson. I'm with TraceLink for about 5 years or so. We're a SaaS provider based in AWS that caters to the pharmaceutical life sciences industry of dealing with protecting the pharmaceutical product through the supply chain and make sure patients get the actual product. So we are hiring for some security roles. I just posted that in the Slack, but there's a number of roles for other types of disciplines as well if you're outside of security and just looking for a developer role.
Cool.
Also, in addition, if anyone else has more jobs, share those. But also, if anyone's looking for work, this is also a good time to let people know. And also, you can, again, do the same thing, post that in the jobs channel as well.
Michael Heimlich, I'm at Dassault System, and as I do every time, post the link, and we've got right now 41 jobs available in the U.S. Now, some of these are specific to location, but I think, frankly, right now, location's irrelevant. And if you see something that looks good, forget about where it's located, and contact me first, because if I present your application, then it will definitely get to someone's desk, to the hiring manager's desk, as opposed to just sitting in a virtual pile somewhere.
And also, you'll probably give him he'll get a referral bonus, I'm guessing.
Something like that too.
Yeah. Okay, anyone else?
Sure. My name is Daniel Soker. I work for Ahead. And just looking at our website, we also seem to have about 40 or maybe even more openings. I know specifically we're looking for GCP. I know it's a bad word, but also a lot of AWS and people with Kubernetes experience. And I'll post the link in the jobs channel. And similar to Michael, telling me beforehand will also help ensure it gets on to the right person's desk.
Excellent. Anyone
Bob
else?
Jackson with HashiCorp. We've got, it is all remote. We've got a bunch of customer success jobs open. These are usually sometimes pre and post sales, and a lot of engineering jobs open. It is all remote, so it doesn't matter where you are. I did post the jobs link in the chat, and it doesn't matter if you mention my name. I get nothing for it, and I have no pull. So.
My name is Carlos Del Castillo with Cell Signaling Technology. We are looking for an application developer. So I posted the link in the jobs channel. So check it out.
Excellent. Excellent. And I'll say, folks, do what you want, but it'd be great to turn your cameras on because we're, community and all that. So let's see. We have some announcements. Let's see. We've got a bunch of meetings coming up. Our pipeline is actually quite full, which is wonderful. On January 26th, we're having Eric Johnson talk about serverless applications in container lambdas. Eric is a hilarious speaker. I mean, I would hear him read the phone book. So that's on Jan 26. On Feb 11, we're having Jeff Barr, the VP of AWS Evangelism, come. That is a real coup. That's going to be a great meeting. We have two others on March 11th. We've got AWS Cloud for .NET developers. We haven't done one of those in a long time. And on Feb 25th, we've got Amazon hero Amira Jalpaj talking about machine learning, and we'll have those out. I'll have more details about those soon, but we've already got 5 meetings or so. It's we're doing well. Let's see. We didn't do an AWS New England Community Day in 2020, but it looks like we are going to do one in 2021. So stay tuned for details on that, and think about lightning talks that y'all might want to give. We're already doing the recording. I remember that. And Jen has some Audible credits for us for swag winners. And actually, that's sort of a question. If you have preferences for things you'd like for swag, let us know. It seems like a bunch of times we've given away the AWS credits and people haven't picked up on them.
I'm sure people will pick up their Audible credits when they win.
Indeed. Okay. So let's dive in. So this is the season when everyone is doing, when most meetups are doing reInvent recaps. And if you didn't know, TLDR stands for Too Long Didn't Read. And for years, I always thought, I knew it had something to do with summary, but I didn't know what the actual acronym was. But so we're taking a slightly different approach, because I've been to some meetups where they've said, here's a slide of the 400 announcements, and we're going to spend 10 seconds on each one. And okay, we're not going to do that. Basically, this is very idiosyncratic. This is going to be what Jen, Ken, and I thought was interesting or uninteresting about reInvent. And we hope that if any of y'all attended any of the sessions, please jump in and let us know what you did and didn't like. And so we're going to sort of weave in between the three of us and hopefully all of you, but we're going to start with Ken is going to talk about Cloud Pegboard, which is a great tool, and for all kinds of reasons for helping look at the sessions. And then he's going to talk about Andy Jassy's keynote. I'll talk about a couple other keynotes, and then we'll dive into things we didn't like. But please make this your own. Ask questions, interrupt us, tell us sessions you've seen, tell us themes. And I guess I'm going to let Ken do a screen share.
Brian, didn't you have some plan to show some hero video or something?
Oh my God. Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little bit flustered. I spent today dealing with a dead sump pump. So things got a little weird. But so I'm an AWS community hero, and AWS treats us incredibly well. And they wanted us to have a great reInvent experience. So they sent us all Oculus headsets, which was kind of amazing. I will say, I used to think, back when Jen was talking about VR, I used to think
weird.
Well, the thing is, you may have noticed that Jen is incredibly enthusiastic about everything. You know, if Jen was telling you about breakfast, it'd be like, oh my God, I had toast. It was incredible. But Oculus really is incredible. And so
yeah, but the toast really was incredible.
Yes, it was. And I used to think that the Oculuses were expensive, but they're half the price of a cell phone. And so Amazon went so right.
Sorry, I'll stop selling.
So Amazon actually created us a place to hang out called the Neon City, and I'm going to show you a video from in there. And inside the Neon City, there was a theater. And so we watched the keynotes together inside the theater inside Neon City. So if you think about it, Andy Jassy was in a room being videotaped. The video was going to a server someplace. And from there, it was going to Oculus Land. And from there, it was going into the Neon City, into the virtual theater, into our screens that we're wearing on our heads. It was so incredibly meta, but it's also incredibly immersive. So we were sitting in a theater, and at one point I bumped my chair, and I turned to the woman who was next to me, and I said, Rachel, I'm sorry I bumped you. And she said, what are you talking about? And I said, I bumped you. And she said, no, you didn't. And I realized I had bumped my physical chair, but not the virtual chair that we were sharing. So it's incredibly immersive. But so let me show you. Okay.
And to talk tech a little while he's queuing this up, the app that they built you can't natively download it, so they side-loaded it, which is a cool thing that you can do for custom apps on Oculus Quest. So if anyone's into game building and wants to load their games, happy to show you how.
Okay, and are y'all seeing the Oculus logo?
Sort of.
Okay, so here we go. So this was the Avatar Central going into a portal, Heroes Square. Are y'all seeing this?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
With the actual loading time we're seeing.
I figured you're better off unboxing it.
Looks like they use the same color.
So they
scheme
wanted
as,
us,
reInvent.
we're in here, and they wanted us to sing the Macarena or dance to the Macarena.
So current.
Well, I mean, when you think about it, Neon City is not current, so they're throwing it back, Ken.
Okay.
They didn't do Cyberpunk 2077 or 37, whatever that is.
Looks like the set that was used for Star Wars Episode 2.
And so in a minute, we got a surprise visitor. So it's a little vertigo inducing. It can be.
So did you always have those rays from your hands?
Yeah. So I'm going to jump ahead. So that was the theater that we used to go into. And then we have this, we have a surprise guest who joined us virtually. Hold on a sec.
said Werner.
Glad I'm not drinking beer.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So Werner Vogel came and talked to us, which was amazing. And I won't make you watch all of that, but at the end, we thanked the person who set it up for us. So now we wanted to give our friend a hug. So now we all swarmed him. So there you go.
Oh.
So Ross. So Ross is the head of the Hero program, and he set that up. And he said that having 40 avatars swarm him and actually be superimposed with him was both cool and kind of freaky. So anyway, so that was that. So I'll segue back over to Ken to talk about cloud pegboard. But if you have an Oculus, I'm Bad Wolf 4242, and please join me because there's some fun games.
And I'm Phoenix Jen.
So, Ken, over to you.
Okay. Well, thanks, Brian. So since I know you and several others here are sci-fi fans, is it just me, or on the Expanse, I don't remember the character's name, but on the Belter ship, there's Naomi's sort of once friend that kind of looks like Werner Vogel. You know who I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Don't you think? I found that kind of freaky. All right, so let's see if I can figure out. I'm going to do two things. I want to show you all quickly a tool that can help with. Well, originally it was designed to help find and schedule your sessions at reInvent, but now that reInvent is over as of kind of now, because we had the January appendix, it's really useful to find sessions. Can you find all the recordings? So I'll give you just a little bit of that, then I'll dive into the Jassy keynote and a little bit of summary there. So let me see if I can figure out how to properly share. It's always a challenge to find which screen. I'll just grab the whole desktop. Okay, can you guys see my my screen here?
Not yet.
Oh, because I should probably click actually share. How's that?
There you go.
Now we do.
Okay. Okay, so like I said, this is a tool I created. I've done versions of this before, so you can find there's thousands of sessions for reInvent. This year there's 2,600, although there are repeats there. So it's a way to just find the different sessions, and then you can schedule them. You could export them to your calendar and things like that. So I'm not going to talk much more about that since it's sort of past. But now what we have is a way to use this as a way to find the sessions that are useful to you to see, so that one of the values of reInvent being virtual, although it's true also when they record the sessions during the previous years, is that you don't have to cram in and see everything. In fact, I suspect a whole lot of people didn't see nearly the same amount of content they normally would have if you actually were physically present at reInvent, just because it's hard to sit down at your desk for 3 weeks doing nothing but watching video. So this way you can kind of look for things, find videos that you want to review throughout the entire year or longer, I suppose. And then you also have the benefit that you can watch videos at faster playback speed. So a couple things. This interface will change when I get to it, hopefully in a week or less or two. I'm gonna get rid of stuff that has to do with scheduling, like you don't need to know about days and things like that, and just really optimize this for finding things for recordings and playing back. But you can search through and you can do these filters. So I would recommend, if you're using this to find sessions to look at, just click on the repeats and click on just the Americas, because that will filter down by a third or get rid of 2/3 of the content. By default, when you bring up the screen, it'll say hide past events, which, since there are only 32 left, you want to make sure to see all past events. So we'll do that. And after that, you can just use session filters, level filters, and then you can also pick tracks. I've got a series of heroes that have kind of custom lists that they shared and were built in. So if you click on Sheen's list, you'll get a whole well, let me just show it instead of saying it. Right, so then here's 43 entries that Sheen Bristles, he's a guy at Lego, big serverless fan, so has contributed. So you can see what other people like. And then of course you can search. So I don't know, what containers, then you can find lots of things that have to do with containers. So go through, use different ways to find what you're looking for. And again, I'm going to get rid of some of these columns shortly. If you click on something, you can get the full description of it, and a couple of things to look at. One of the things to do, it's handy, is to click on the popularity to reverse sort it. This is popularity based off of people clicking on this wish list column when they were scheduling, and so it's popularity by a subset of Cloud Pegboard users that chose to actually use the wish list capability. But it does give you a feel for, you can see what the tail looks like here. It's a fairly long tail, but help you maybe find some sessions, especially in the top ones, that other people found to be enticing, and maybe you might want to look at them. So click on that and you can see the abstract. Let's see. If you have any comments on this, especially as I revamp this, certainly please let me know. I'm trying to always tune it to make it more accessible. For example, should I put the abstract, in the new column once I get rid of the start time and end time columns? So that's the popularity. One other thing to point out is, now that you don't need to use the wish list feature to mark sessions that you might want to attend and put them on your calendar, you can use the wish list feature to basically build a reading list. So if you just say, find something and say, hey, that looks interesting, you just click on that, and then if I click on this filter here, wish list, I get just the items in my wish list, and after I watch the videos, then I can unclick it, and then it will just go away from my wish list next time I filter. So that's kind of it. Two more things to show you is, when you want to actually see the video, and again, I'm going to make this be a column in itself, so you don't have to have an extra click, but you just click on the title here. That'll open up the reInvent site, which, interestingly, these are not on YouTube. The keynotes and several of them are, but generally they're not on YouTube. So I assume because AWS wants to make everything based off Elemental, I assume that's what this is on the back end. So this is really the way that you need to do to find the session. Once you click on the thing, you'll find the sessions and media, some related content, and then you can just play it and watch the recording. Now, if you, like most people, you probably don't want to watch at normal speed, but the sessions here, you can go at half speed or 2x speed, which for some speakers, and actually Jassy, you can do it 2x, but a lot of speakers, you really can't. And so the solution to that is to do two possibilities. All right, that's annoying. All right, you open up debugger mode, and if you go back to Cloud Pegboard, go down to the bottom here, this is a little section here. So just click that copy thing there, go back here, and then just paste and hit enter. And that way, that'll set the speed to be whatever you put in here. So it's actually, Jassy sounds hilarious at half speed. It sounds quite drunk, but you can do 1.5, 1.75, whatever. And that'll just set the playback speed for when you hit this. So that's handy. And one other thing to tell you, which will hopefully get you being used these things properly or efficiently. Jeremy Daly also has a Chrome extension. So If you use Chrome and you want to put in an extension, that's another way to do it. It does the exact same thing so as this, but he's got an extension that makes it a little bit more user-friendly instead of having to jump into the debugger. I think that's all I really needed to show you there. It's called pegboard.com. I'll show you a slide in a second. Reinvent 2020. So check it out, and hopefully that'll help you really find the sessions because there's a ton of content, and oftentimes you want to find the content when it's relevant to the work you're doing and not all in 1 week every year. So let me stop sharing so I can see you all again. Any questions about that?
Highly recommended. I've relied on this tool. It's awesome.
And do you have any plans on going back and like pulling the data from the earlier reinvents, or is the data even available to kind of
I have 2019. There's a separate page for 2019, which is similar. It looks roughly the same. It's just all the 2019 videos. I don't plan on going back beyond that. The 2019 page has the videos, the links, and those are actually YouTube links. It has links to slides on SlideShare when they existed. And for a whole bunch of them, I actually have just downloadable audio files as well. I may merge these things, but depends how much effort it takes. It might just be easier for me to just leave it, be two separate pages. So yeah, I mean, ideally I put them together so when you search for something, you could find it in both years. Of course, always you have to be careful with videos of AWS content because this stuff gets aged pretty fast because things change fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments about that?
All
right.
Amazon should probably use this for
so it
2021.
turns out that this year, last year they did AWS does a lot of things really well, as we all know, and they do some things really poorly. The schedule management around reinvents has just notoriously been bad. Last year I had a similar tool, and also it would text you when new sessions came on during, so you could kind of get in line quickly and stuff. And a lot of people liked it. It was kind of neat. This year they actually had some problems out of the gate with like basically you put things on the calendar, it was in the wrong time zone and stuff, and there's a bunch of other problems which I won't go through now. But anyway, this thing actually went viral, which was my first. I guess you call it viral. I mean, I went up 5,000% to my usage on this thing, which is fortunately all serverless and all just works. Yeah, so it went viral because a lot of people really found it useful, and the comparison to the AWS tool is it's really hard to navigate, and this one makes it a little bit more. I called it the agenda tool for humans. So, all right, let me figure out now if I can try to share. I generally don't share in presentation mode, but I'm going to try that and see if I could figure out how to do that. Give me 2 secs. See if this works. Okay, are you seeing my presentation now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yay! Things like that never work first time. So here's the link if anyone wants to use that tool to find your videos. Okay, so mode shift. Let's talk about Jassy's keynote a little bit. This is my perspective and opinions. I actually haven't watched anyone else's, so it'll be interesting to know what other people think and how these corroborate. So it is opinionated and it's a filter. So just quick background, since I'm giving you an opinion, who am I? You can kind of read that for yourself. If you want to contact me, here's all my contact information. And I'm also on the Slack for Boston AWS as well as several others, but I think there's a few too many ways to contact me. All these will work. Yeah, I don't think I need to say anything more about that. So actually, Brian said we're not going to walk you through a list of boring 10 seconds. Maybe. I'll try not to do it. But so my goal for this segment here is to take a 3-hour keynote, which for the 5 years prior to this I've seen in person, and filter it down because a lot of people may not have seen it. If you've seen it, great. But if you haven't, hopefully I'll basically be able to give you as much content as you need, and so you don't have to worry about it, watching it, and don't have to worry that, oh, but I feel like I kind of should see the AWS keynote because maybe I'm missing something. I think that by the time we're done with next, whatever it takes, 15, 20 minutes, you will not feel like you're missing out on something, and we'll get the essence of it. So I'm going to just quickly tell about, again, my perspective of what was in, what was out, at sort of looking at the keynote as a presentation in terms of content, talk about some of the themes, again, my view of that. I'm going to run down the announcements, but ideally, there was a lot of announcements. And I'd like to use that really to let you know what was announced during that keynote, almost like the menu list, but really use that as a springboard so you can then later go and say, oh, that thing was announced in Jassy's keynote. I didn't hear about that. I should make a note to go follow up on that. We're not going to be able to go deep on any of these really. But from the perspective as a springboard, time permitting, we have to be careful because, you know, with dozens of announcements times 3 different keynotes, we can't go too deep. But basically, like, I don't know any more than you guys know. And so if there's something that's interesting or someone has some question, let's make this interactive, jump in, and someone else might be able to provide a lot more color and interest, or, you know, or maybe point out a session, announcement that maybe I glossed over that someone thinks, you know what, why didn't you spend a little bit more time, like 10 more seconds on this thing? Because that's actually really important. Everybody should know about that. So, anyway, so feel free to interrupt, make this interactive, and have it be a discussion. And if we don't get to all of the announcements, that's totally fine. One other point, Brian, Jen, or anyone for that matter, left unchecked, I will go on. So, you know, yell at me when it if this gets too long. So I'll try my best not to do so. Okay, so what's included and excluded? So it's interesting when you plow through the keynote with the intent of sort of summarizing it, how a lot of stuff drops away and you kind of get to the essence of it. And there's it's essentially it was a themeless keynote, but to the extent there was some theme overriding, there was a marketing message which was reinvent. And you would think that a reInvent conference that would be a common theme, but it hasn't actually been called out quite so much in previous years. The idea here was Jassy saying, rethink your businesses, reinvent, which is really code for move your stuff from on-prem to the cloud, re-architect old applications in an AWS way, and use a lot of our services and do so, because the more you build, the more services we can sell you and make. And just calling it what it is, I think that's what it is. Not to say that it's not a good idea to reinvent, we should, but that was Andy sort of drumming through that reinvent message, which is really because that's their marketing plan and that's the strategic approach. The other sort of big takeaway, I would say, for describing this particular keynote is, you know how a lot of people eat potato chips because it's just a carrier for salt or dip? This keynote was a carrier for announcements, just like the potato chip is. And so it was astonishing, more than it has been in the past, how much, and maybe it was because it was remote, it was just really a list of announcements presented by somebody who some miraculous way keeps it all in his head without appearing to be reading his notes, and just one after the other after the other. So they did intersperse a few customer presentations. I feel like there's fewer than they have in the past. Most of them were pretty uninteresting and uninspiring. That it wasn't like, oh, I got to like, that company's doing something that I didn't think could be done before. That will inspire me to maybe, you know, think more broadly or something. It was just sort of, you know, marketing stuff. Boom was a company that's building a supersonic jet for passenger transport anywhere around the world in 4 hours, which is just kind of neat. It's built by a software engineer who became a pilot and who's now building this company. And Brian is a pilot. I used to be a helicopter pilot. So I kind of thought, oh, that's cool. Maybe I should go build a supersonic airplane company now. So it was sort of interesting, but still kind of marketing stuff. You know, I wouldn't go back and watch for that. The Carrier presentation, Carrier, if you know, is the company that does air conditioners and refrigerated coolant systems and cold chain capabilities. So you'd think it wouldn't be all that interesting. I was actually surprisingly interested, and the presenter was very good, and the content was sort of interesting and compelling, not necessarily in a total technical way, but I don't know if it's true, I haven't verified. They said bananas are the most consumed food on Earth, which surprised me a little bit. I thought some grains like rice might be, and that food waste, a third of all food is wasted. And then they gave some numbers behind that and how horrific that is. And so I felt that was fairly compelling from just a citizen of the world perspective, and is a good speaker. And the talk was about, his little segment was about cold chain and IoT sensors, making sure that, for example, on bananas, they stay the right temperature throughout many of these different transitions across trucks to ships to warehouses and so forth, and how they do that with AOT and AWS. So that was kind of neat. Moderna got a shout out for a couple of sentences. That was a little bit interesting to me because for many of us who are in the Boston area, it's a Boston company. I used to work one floor away from these guys. And now the work that I'm personally doing is with a sister company of Moderna. It's a company that has the same parent company, Flagship Pioneering. And I'm actually right now building this platform very similar to what Moderna did, using some of the same people. So that was kind of interesting. They got a shout out, so that was fun. Other than that, the rest of it was announcements. The applause was canned, which was weird, and okay, it was worth doing. It's a new format, so they did okay with the format, doing these weird sort of staged presentations without an audience. On the Excluded side, like I said, there's basically there's no overarching theme really. I didn't think of any standout content or presentations like, oh, go look at this time segment. And of course, I missed people, bands. The live band I actually used to think was fun and good, if not a little forced, but and crowds piling in and getting out of the room, travel and energy. None of that was there. This was a video recording, so you could learn about a bunch of announcements. So, next. So quickly on some of the themes and impressions. So there's, especially when you talk about infrastructure, there's a bunch of announcements that cater to what I would say is pushing the boundaries. There are people that are trying to train ML models ever faster, and they care about the chips that are being used and to squeeze the most in training performance, or IO bandwidth, or for EBS volumes, or things of that nature. So, and so they always have these announcements, and for some people they'll be interesting. I always find that these are driven by a fairly small number of big customers that AWS caters to, and that's what drives, where the dollars are, it's what's going to drive their business. And so sometimes these things are interesting from a technology standpoint, but if you think about the user base of the Gaussian curve, most of us are not on the upper edge of that skirt of that curve. We're kind of in that middle standard deviation. So they're interesting to know, but we do get the benefit of the splash effect if they're building some of these things for these people that are really pushing the boundaries in terms of performance, or if you're looking at like Amazon Connect in terms of the capabilities of what that application and what that service does and all of its sub-services, then they're going deeper, deeper, deeper in there, then that's useful to you. So that's kind of always been the case, I would say. The next sort of big thing is, I used to, when I was justifying an enterprise move to the cloud back at Novartis, I was always trying to make the case to when cloud was newer and saying, hey, don't worry about vendor lock-in, we're all in AWS, and don't worry, their costs are coming down, and they consistently come down or stay the same. And so it's interesting, I kind of mentally track that to see when they're going to make me a liar. And that trend continues. Costs never go up for features. They do continue to bring costs down, and that's actually pretty remarkable for any company, let alone especially a tech company, to bring costs down in the way that they have. The examples that have popped into my head were Aurora Serverless v2, the GP3 EBS volumes, which probably should have been lowercase there, 1 millisecond Lambda billing, And some of these things were pre-announced before the keynote, but Jassy reiterated them. So that was kind of worth noting that there's definitely some trends there.
Can I jump in for just a second?
Yeah.
The Aurora serverless one is actually kind of interesting in that for folks as a background, Aurora serverless means that you don't have to say how many servers you want. The system will scale up or down as needed, but it has been a very coarse-grained scaling until now. The scale up takes a little while, and the scale down takes a long time. And so with serverless v2, the scale up is almost immediate, and the scale down is quite quick as well. The flip side, and there was a lot of discussion about this because the base cost is higher. And so if you're running a steady state system, serverless 2 is more expensive than serverless 1. But most people aren't running steady state. So there was, when this was announced, there was a lot of debate in the Hero community of whether this was a cool thing or not. It probably is, but don't assume, don't do one size fits all. The 1 millisecond Lambda is just amazing. I remember when EC2 instances were billed by the hour, and now 1 millisecond. And my own Lambdas run generally for a couple hundred milliseconds, and before they were billed by 100. So I'm saving on average 50 milliseconds of cost on every single Lambda invocation. So that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, and on Lambdas, in some regards, Lambdas usually aren't the dominant cost. You're going to pay for other things that they're connected to, but it's still very cool, and it gives you that one less reason to think, I should really optimize these things. Is it really worth my time? Now it's like, don't worry about it even longer unless you're really doing some fairly large scale thing. So anytime they do something like that you cannot have to worry about something because it's not cost effective to spend the engineering time on it, is always welcome. And the serverless v2, Brian has a really good point on that. And there's a number of services where that's the case, where you have to look at the duty cycle and look at the cost over enough wide window to figure out which deployment model makes most sense for you. And so now it's really kind of neat to have that option, and continues a trend where they're doing these things. And with a lot of the serverless features too, sometimes they come out in a kind of a clunky way. Like I remember I used Comprehend, and Comprehend is very much of a batch thing. And no matter how small a job is, it takes 6 minutes to spin it up. Then they've kind of made it better with sort of real-time Comprehend, which isn't quite there. And so it just always gets a little bit better, it's nice to be able to trust that's the direction things are going.
Yeah, and Ken, I'll jump in with one more thing if I could. I totally agree with you on the pushing the boundaries. That at reInvent there are going to be new EC2 instances that are bigger and faster and cheaper and so on. And there's going to be bigger EBS volumes and all that. But one of the interesting things we've tried to look at is how many people are still using M2 4x larges for all their cases. Amazon now has 100 or so different instance types, but how many companies have gone through and done the performance measurements to figure out which instance types actually make sense for you? It's a huge opportunity for extra savings, but carry on.
Yeah, and because I am such a serverless focused person, I'm going to talk out my butt for a second. That there's a whole bunch of new features that will help you optimize those costs and wizards to help you pick the right instance. And I can't remember for the life of me what they're all called at the moment, but just point out that those exist now. It's getting better to help you pick those instances because the menu's kind of insane. All right, so thanks for that. Just running through the rest of these. There are a bunch of ML announcements in the keynote, and that's in addition to what Brian will mention as well, because there's a whole separate ML keynote. I remember when actually I even did a talk on the very first AWS ML service, which is one of the few services I've ever seen that disappears. It's called like AWS Machine Learning, and it was like a test of the market, and then it really actually went away. So then they came up with SageMaker, and they've been building and building and building, and it really has been fairly significant and impressive at the feature set, mostly surrounded around SageMaker, but all the way across the 3 different layers of the capabilities, the way they stratify their ML and AI offerings, that they really are just bashing away at this stuff and cranking it out. It's impressive. And so that trend is continuing, and clearly they've committed and are delivering.
And Ken, if I can, sorry, I'm just going to keep jumping in because we've said everyone can jump in. I believe that the biggest announcement of reInvent was in ML, which is SageMaker Clarify. Clarify is a system to detect bias in your machine learning modeling data. ML drives so much in the world now, and your training data drives what your model will predict. And almost all training data has unbelievable bias in it. As an example, when was it Tesla, the auto driving? When Tesla first had pedestrian detection, so you wouldn't run over pedestrians, it was awesome at detecting white pedestrians. And then it was, and that's a real problem. And SageMaker Clarify is designed to detect and remove and tell you what your biases are in your training data. And I think that's the most magnificent thing that Amazon has done this year, or possibly ever. So.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. This is, and I think there's more and more discussion, especially with some of the news out of Google, for people to really, and it seems within the last 2 years, I'd say, we're talking about the bias and the ethics of ML and AI in a much greater way, and we really need to kind of keep talking about it. So you're right that this is important to start having some tooling to make it better. And I'm sure there's going to be a whole large suite of these things to not only detect bias, but also start looking in deeper sentiment analysis to try to start uncovering hate speech and all that sort of thing in a more easily packaged way. Okay, so another sort of takeaway I would say is AWS has planted a lot of seeds in a lot of different areas, and they just keep expanding the range in these established areas. So I didn't see anyone, this wasn't the year of, oh, we're kind of diving into serverless, or we're diving into IoT, or diving into AI, ML. Those have been sort of big disruption-ish like things that have happened at previous reInvents. I don't believe that happened here. And they basically said, we have these established areas and we're just going to keep going deeper and better on them. So that, which is good. And sometimes I'm saying these things, they're not necessarily judgments, they're just analysis, although sometimes they're judgy. Okay, so one last item was that there's at the end, Jassy was essentially trying to redefine hybrid, which I thought was sort of interesting. Hybrid is not just using on-prem data center versus cloud. He was really defining hybrid to meaning all these different levels of tiers of hybrid. Means like it could be a device on a farm, it could be a 5G edge location, it could be in your data center, and then the fairly broad array of devices we have now between snowmobile and snowball and snow cone and outposts and panorama and all these. There's just a whole lot of these things, and so they really are trying to redefine the term hybrid in their definition of it, which really says it's going to include all these ranges, these different devices, which are different types of things that are on the edge of the cloud. And edge is, I'm not sure any longer, I guess it's still an apt term. There's cloud and then there's kind of everything else. And if you call everything else edge, sure.
And Ken, you wanted a time check. You're on your second slide and it's 6:40.
Yep. Thank you. And this is the last of these, I think. So the other kind of comments is, I say this every year with reInvent. There's a lot of announcements. I've tried to highlight which ones are announced but not available, preview, beta, actual GA. When you're looking at announcements, you really need to filter a lot about when is this thing really going to be accessible to me. If it's really interesting, you might want to dive in and get accepted to a private preview or whatever. But it's always important to sort of not miss that a substantial number of these things are announced and it'll be available in this year, or actually in 2021 is what Jassy would say. Sometimes H1, other times just in 2021. So take care on that. Okay, so I'm not going to go through the remaining slides, but I'm going to like flash them in a sense. So just hold on for 1 second here. But anyway, so if you look at these, because I'll send these slides out if people want them.
Ken, did you freeze?
I'm going to just put these up, and then in the interest of time, I'm just going to open up for discussion. So I'll just talk about, you'll see I have 3 of these things. I'm just going to talk about the highlighted ones briefly. So part of the story here is, look at this. The tagline is underneath, or summary is underneath, and the main heading is the left indented. There's all these services, all these announcements, and all these announcements were all in Andy's keynote, and that's just one of 3 keynotes, and not all the announcements. So there's a ton of content that was just like that potato chip was picking up dip after dip, and I love dip, but okay, there was a lot there. So I think some of the things just to pay attention to, and I'm going to highlight them, and then we'll come back and say, do we want to talk about any of these now, or come back during the Q&A, we can talk about them. But the fact that Lambdas can now have container support is just a whole new way of thinking about Lambda, and potentially pretty important. Proton is this way to deploy, just kind of build the whole serverless deployment environment and try to simplify that pipeline. And it's unclear yet whether this is a good thing or not. I haven't laid hands on it, but I think it's an important one to note. Talked about Service v2. I'm not so interested in this, but I bet other people are. If you have Microsoft SQL Server stuff and you're trying to port those, now they're basically doing a play to make it easy to port using the Babelfish.
I think that's huge.
Yeah.
That is a potential death blow for or not a death blow, but that is a huge shot across the bow for SQL Server.
Yeah, and if you remember, I don't remember how many years ago now, but there was a time when they started doing all these database migration services and schema migration, and just there was a suite of tools that came out there, attacking Oracle, and so they've kind of got that suite fairly well covered. Now they're going after SQL Server. So yeah, the gloves are off, and then they got a open source version of that as well that's coming. So here, there's a lot of SageMaker stuff, which is all kind of neat. There's a surprisingly large amount of Connect features. And again, this is one of the things that if you use Connect, and clearly they got some big customers that are pouring money into Connect, Brian, I think you used to use it in your last job. They're putting a lot of effort in that. But even though I don't really use Connect and it's niche-y, and if you're not doing a call center, you don't care. The fact that they have this Connect Voice ID, I thought was really slick. The idea here is instead of asking you a bunch of questions in your mother's maiden name, they just listen in and they try to capture your voice print and decide if it's you. And if it is, the agent just knows about it. And if it's not confident, then it lets the agent know that maybe they got to ask you some questions to do something else, or send you over to fraud detection team or something. But I thought that was just kind of neat to know that that's obviously you kind of expect that to have existed by now, but it's nice to see that it's now in a easily accessible format as just yet another AWS service. Just enable it and call it. Lastly, again, if you're looking for you have devices and equipment in the field, you want to monitor, you got some bunch of stuff there. And it's funny, I actually was hearing him talk about Outposts, and I didn't know where he was going with it. And what I was thinking is, wouldn't it be neat if I had Outposts, which if you don't know is basically an Amazon region in a 42U rack that does a subset, not all the features today, of features that you can put on your edge in your data center, but at least you control it and manage it just like any other AWS service. So I was thinking, it would be kind of neat if I could get a little pizza box and stick it under my desk or something, or in the office, and have a local AWS instance. Well, that's actually what this is. They got 1U and 2U versions of Outposts, which again makes it possible to start deploying AWS places, again, in like an agriculture scenario, a factory scenario, or something like that, where you may not need a whole rack, but you want some local compute that works like AWS. And then, of course, you can put a snowball edge or something like that there too if you want more storage. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. It seems like a lot, but then again, I did compress 3 hours down into a short amount of time. So let me stop screen sharing, or did that stop? Yeah.
Yep.
And Brian, Jen, or anyone else, we could talk about anything now, or Brian, you want to just dive into your stuff? Totally up to everyone else.
Yeah, let me just do a super quick on a couple of the other keynotes, and I'll try to really compress it. I will say the infrastructure keynote is one I actually went back and listened to it again today, and that keynote I would actually suggest you listen to, because it's so different, and it really wasn't a bunch of announcements. It really finally was a theme. And I mean, they did make some announcements, SageMaker, CI/CD, and so on. But interestingly enough, they talked a lot about sustainability. They talked about Amazon's efforts to be green. And they said, the greenest energy is the energy you don't use. And they asserted that Amazon's data centers are 88% more power efficient than corporate data centers. They bizarrely talked about production of cement and concrete. And when he started talking about that, I thought, did I jump to the wrong tab in my browser? Mm-hmm. But it turns out that, and this is shocking to me, that cement production accounts for 7 to 8% of the world's carbon output, which is amazing. And when you're making cement, you create these things called clinkers, and clinkers are what you need to make the cement for the concrete. And Amazon has figured out a way to make better clinkers, or clinkers with less carbon in them by 25%. And they're coming up with a way to inject carbon dioxide into the concrete to basically sequester it, which was kind of amazing. They talked about at their data centers, Amazon treats the water that they use to cool the data centers before returning it back. And so they are not returning it back to the sewer system. They're returning it back to the aquifers, the reservoirs, so as not to have to cause more treatment. And this one really sort of wigged me. They talked about how in Cape Town, a lot of the water is being taken up by invasive species. So they've had an effort to attack the invasive species in Cape Town to save water, which is like, okay, you guys are sort of all over the place. And that was sort of a segue then to talking about the Nitro chip and custom silicon, and how they've made massive inroads in their Nitro chip, which powers everything, but especially containers. And one of the things they said is most processors are general purpose processors because they have to be, and so they're good at everything, or they're as good as they are at everything. But Amazon is getting more towards specific custom silicon. So they have the Graviton processor and the something
Inferentia.
Inferentia, right. So they've got one processor that does machine learning training, and then a different silicon that does the actual evaluation. And they said by making it specific, it's much more efficient and faster and so on. And they had some graphs about the MIPS per watt, which was not a metric I've ever heard before, but Graviton is off the charts on that. And they talked also about their UPS system, and you're like, again, your UPS system for your data centers. Well, they've designed their whole own UPS that's more efficient, and so that keynote was pretty cool, and very theme based. And then I'll jump into Vogel's keynote, and again I'll try to make this one quick. But again, this one was worth watching because this was Vogel's wandering around an old sugar processing plant in Amsterdam and talking about the evolution of technology. And he talked about that COVID has affected us all, and we've all had to make changes. But then he said, but as techies, we can have a disproportionate impact on making things better. And so he was talking a lot about how we make remote work better, how we make systems fun again. He talked about learning Rust and really finding that interesting. And I don't know Rust, but he seemed quite jazzed on Rust, in particular because Rust apparently is amenable to mathematical algorithmic analysis. And so he talked a lot about provable algorithms. A million years ago, there used to be this notion that you could prove your algorithms as opposed to just test the crap out of them. And Vogels was talking about going back there, and he was talking about using that and ML everywhere. He said at AWS, we ask how we can make anything better with ML. And so he talked about CloudWatch Insights, so you could look at your log files more easily. About there's this tool, DevOps Guru, that will look at your running system and tell you what's going to break in your deployment, which is kind of amazing. They have the VPC reachability analyzer, which will just look at your configuration and tell you if your VPCs can talk to each other the way you think they can talk to each other. And this is all provable by configuration as opposed to actually running tests. They also, Amazon introduced essentially the Chaos Monkey service, the fault injection simulator, which is kind of amazing. And they talked about Cloud9, which is their in the cloud code editor, which I've started using, and how that can be used for shared development in these crazy times. So I'd say both of those keynotes were really worth looking at. And there were, of course, announcements. EBSs can multi-attach. There's Amazon location services now. They're now offering managed Prometheus and managed Grafana. And if you care about those tools, I don't really use those tools, but if you care about those tools, that's awesome. And I'll stop there to leave some time.
Yeah,
Jenny,
in the chat, Cloud Shell, yeah.
Cloud Shell, yeah. And I will say just, I don't know. I'm glad that more people could go to reInvent, but I really miss the in-person part. I thought the expo was completely lame this year. And I'll stop talking. Jen, if you want.
Yeah, I'm glad I was holding on to a few of those, hoping that you would mention them. Like the things I was interested in, the announcements were managed Grafana, the location services, and the Chaos Monkey. I've been watching the chaos engineering stuff for a few years now, and I was a little shocked that it took them this long to get it out. And it looks like towards the end of this year that we'll be able to finally get our hands on it. So that will be pretty exciting. What I noticed from reInvent this year, and it was interesting being able to kind of sit back. Normally you go to reInvent and it's like, you have to like quickly figure out what your schedule is going to be and compete with other people to get the spots. And if you don't get in, it's like running from one end of the strip to the other end of the strip, trying to like wait in line. And this year was completely different. And from an attendee of sessions perspective, I think it was a little bit better, yet I still see a lot of areas for opportunity. Some of, I went in with a different mindset this year. Normally it's just like, oh, what can I get into? But this year I was very thoughtful in my approach towards it. I thought, my role is innovation. I'm going to look at topics that are around innovation and draw innovation inspiration from some of the different talks. So, that being said, Jassy's keynote, I thought it was really interesting how he approached talking about reinventing, and a lot of it rings really true to what I've been following, across the board at a lot of these companies. It's, looking at your biggest problem that you're facing and then seeing like, let's not try to improve it 10%. Let's try to improve it like 10x. And so, talking about how, Nitro and how they now can like pump out EC2 instance variations much quicker. That was really interesting to me. I watched a few of the Amazon Culture of Innovation sessions, which was less about, the services of AWS and more about like the process that goes into your engineering. So I thought that was really interesting, and I took a lot of notes there. And then I followed and the entertainment and gaming industry. So, interesting things, changes in broadcasting. There was a really interesting talk called The Next Frontier in Broadcasting, Professional Live Content Production. And they talked about the journey from analog to digital and all the way to cloud. And there were some really great visuals about the challenges, as well as the innovations that are coming down the pipe with respect to broadcast media. And it's funny because this week I've been watching CES, and a lot of the entertainment from a consumer tech perspective, that's very married with the stuff that they talked about at reInvent. It's just like the front end versus the back end versions of the stories. The technologies, 5G, edge computing, and in the entertainment industry, like using machine language to fill in the gaps, Brian, like you were talking about. So, they've now got 8K TVs. We're not recording 8K quality media to push out yet. So they're able to use machine learning to kind of upscale the content that they have to make it seem more robust and more interesting. And I thought that was really interesting. For example, if you're, audio and video, like if you're in your car using your entertainment systems, microphones and speakers to not just provide you entertainment, but to listen externally for noise and to be able to offset and, make it like Bose's quiet comfort, what's it called? Noise cancellation. Or TVs to detect when the lighting is different in your space, so it can adjust the way that it projects the quality of your television. So, machine learning, the use cases are very interesting and inspiring. And when you think about, what you're doing in your daily life and drawing inspiration from how some of these other companies are using it. So, I watched Disney, which talked about Disney Plus, of course, streaming service, all about their Kinesis streams. Everything's event driven, asynchronous. What I thought was most interesting is their concept of data ubiquity. They want to make sure that anyone in the company has access to any of the data that they need to make decisions kind of in real time, and empowering their developers to do A/B tests to provide the best service that they can provide for the area that they own. That was really interesting. Creating game development pipelines on AWS. It was really fun to see a talk by Apocalypse Studios and how they're very on-prem, the way that they would work, and their build times, I think I wrote it down here, used to be 7 hours. And when they were forced to move to the cloud because they couldn't be in person anymore, it reduced their build times to 20 minutes. Like, that's ridiculous how much more productive they were. And they also said that it went from, their backups went from costing them $15,000 a year to $700 a year. So super interesting. You know, and lots of other stuff like Ubisoft was there, which was really interesting because I don't know if y'all have heard, but Ubisoft is now partnered with Lucasfilm Games to build the next like Star Wars games. So they're all over the news. Let's see, what else was interesting? Lego was fun, but really nothing new learned there. So I liked those from the business perspective. There were also a lot of really good sessions from just like the learning perspective. The only interesting thing I drew from, you know, I can summarize from that is like, unless you're in the middle of building something, those sessions really don't provide a lot of value. Like, you know, there was one on Amplify where they walk, you know, command line, walk you through step by step. Like, just watching that really doesn't give you a lot of value unless you're trying to follow along and do it. You know, there were some really good sessions, I thought, on SageMaker, breaking down how easy it is to use. There were some great ones on messaging and EventBridge. But, you know, like I said, unless you're like following along and taking notes on how to do it and just learning, those I find were much less useful. So I don't know if I would go to those in the future. So that's my TLDR of what I've gone through so far. There's still a lot more to do, but it's interesting to see this conference along with the other ones and see, you know, how you can kind of connect the dots.
Yeah, I mean, along the lines, last year I decided to only go to Chalk Talks because the workshops were just cookbooks and the sessions I could watch later, but the Chalk Talks were ones where I could actually, you know, sit down and have a conversation, you know, with 70 other people, but have a conversation with experts. And this year there were no Chalk Talks. And, you know, over the years, there's been less and less of the Q&A with speakers. So I think that's, you know, I think that's a problem. I mean, I think next year is probably going to be hybrid. I think, you know, we had 70,000 people last year, and this year they're saying they had a couple 100,000 to one degree or another. It's unclear how they're counting, but you know, it'll probably be hybrid next year. But I do hope we can go back to more actual interactions with the speakers. But so, did anyone who's attending watch any sessions?
Carlos, yeah, I watched quite a few sessions.
What are your thoughts?
Some of them were interesting, or I got a lot of information from, and some of them I just was, you know, upset that I spent the time, essentially. But yeah, I think when the person was actually part of the team that worked on the technology that they were talking about, the sessions were a lot better.
It's funny.
Anyone else?
With so many hours of content, you really need to know, like, well, what you only have so many hours in a day to like invest in this. So like, what are you really trying to get out of it? And how can they, you know, describe the sessions in a way that you can, you know, marry with your, you know, your requirements? That's a problem that I think needs to be solved.
Right. And I'll say also, I spoke to one AWS hero in particular who actually gave a talk, and he was complaining bitterly about how much restriction they placed on how the talk could be. They said, you know, you can only be videoed like here, can't use your hands. You know, it's it has to be read. It has to be read by a script. It has to be a one take, you know, one and done take. So he said it took him like a week to get one perfect take. And I don't know that that's the most conducive way to get watchable, you know, media.
And funny enough, I watched a session where the gentleman was out in the woods. So, and he was an AWS employee. So,
Well,
Well, yeah, what they've done in the past, like for in-person presentations, is they've given us, very strict guidance because they have to. But then when you start deviating it, they don't come and police it all that hard. But the thing, I mean, think about, they're dealing with millions of possible viewers, hundreds of thousands of, and thousands of presenters ultimately, and so it's hard for them to manage the way it should look, but also it's hard for us to find that path through. So Jen, what we need, of course, is we need an ML wizard that knows what you do, everything about all this information everyone gathers about our lives in AWS too, and what we're working on, to say, okay, you're in the middle of this project. Here's a swath that actually might be useful to you. And what's also always interesting is, even if you go at it with a goal in mind, like, hey, I'm working on a new event-based serverless architecture, or something like that, then maybe that indicates a whole bunch of content. But you also want to be able to do, like all the stuff that you do, is look over the horizon to be knowing about, there's some things out there that I just want to put in the back of my head that it exists, even though it's not useful today. And you have to be able to play both of those just in any technology, right? You have to be able to focus because there's way too much content, and yet you still need to be able to be exposed. And it's a really tough balance.
It's funny, it's so different than like Google I/O, which has a much shorter like list of sessions to go to. So it's easier to parse and to, filter out the noise.
And Ken, to your point, I think a lot of what you were suggesting happens, or used to happen, in the cafeteria and on the bus to sessions and waiting in line. Someone that I was speaking to said that they missed the waiting in line for sessions, and we're all like, what, are you crazy? And he said, by definition, I'm waiting in line with someone else who's interested in this topic, so I can have an impromptu conversation with them about it. And that's where I find I got most of my, interesting stuff. I mean, I think it's part of the larger problem. I mean, we're all doing Zoom. We're doing Zoom right now, and we've tried to do breakout rooms to help with the impromptu stuff, but no one has figured out the ad hoc system. Somebody will figure out a way to capture I'm getting a cup of coffee and I happen to run into Jen, who happens to be getting a cup of coffee, and we have a conversation. Someone will figure out that in the virtual world, or not the VR world, but someone will figure out how to do that in Zoom or Teams or something, and that's going to be a game changer.
you may need an Oculus in order to get to that.
Possibly.
I'm not sure that you have to go full VR to get that, though.
You'd be bumping into real physical chairs at that point, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
The thing is, in VR, you have to make sure that you're sitting down. If you're sitting down in a chair, that there's a real chair in your room. I will say I have banged my hand against the wall a bunch of times playing racquetball in VR.
I know Cisco did this a few years ago in Second Life, where they did the whole conference online, and you were an avatar.
Afrotech did that this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's almost there. I mean, Jen and I actually had a meeting in Spatial I/O where our two little avatars went in, and we tried to. Yeah, it didn't work. We were trying to draw on a whiteboard, and it felt like Duplo and crayons.
Minus all the fun of Duplo and crayons.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's getting there, but it's not quite there. Both for reInvent and the world in general. Because just think about it. I mean, the conversation where you decide at your old business to get up, get a cup of coffee, you walk into cafeteria, you see that there are people. Oh, those people are deep in thought. Oh, here's somebody who's maybe sitting by themselves. I'll go wander over and talk with them. That conversation we haven't captured, and I think that's what a lot of us are missing.
Yeah, absolutely. and everyone's been experimenting with different things, but it's hard, and it isn't necessarily something, oh, we just have to figure it out. I mean, we'll get better at it, but to some extent, there is physics involved. That it's different, right? To be able to have those kinds of dynamics, and you know, it's some things are just hard to synthesize, I think. You know, one of the interesting things about you know, slightly switching, but on the conference side of things, is there's a very different dynamic when the conference forces you to say, look, for this week when I'm in Vegas, I am not doing anything else by and large, and I will sit down at lunch with a different person every single day and start a new conversation with them, and I will wait in line, and I will spend time trying to optimize, and however much time I spend and whatever, I'll just pick the best sessions I can go to and I can get into within the 4 or 5 days. Once you have the degree of freedom of being on your own, like, I can't see why I have other things that are always going to be more priority than watching videos of things that I may or may not get something out of, because at this point, I'll just say, like, I'll watch something on AppSync when I'm starting my next AppSync project. And so, yeah, I think it's good so that we have this, and I think it's great that there's a whole bunch of new content that we can get on demand. But there's a lot of problems with having to go to Vegas right after Thanksgiving and fight crowds and fight trying to get into sessions. But there's some real value in being able to set aside and just kind of go there, immerse, and then, you know, and just have that forced switch.
Right.
So who else?
I want to segue us and have Jen give away the Audible credits.
All right. Should I ask a question? I have a good one.
All right.
Awesome.
Who are the 2 main characters in the new Netflix series Cobra Kai?
Put the answer first with the right answer into the chat with the Audible credit.
And Jen, you're going to have to look because I don't know the answer.
And here's a hint. They're the same 2 that were in the Karate Kid many, many years ago. Wow. I guess we might have to go to a backup. John's the closest. But... Oh, wait. Victor. Although I do like Matt's more formal answer. Victor, send me private message with your email address and I will ship you off a code.
Where is Victor? I don't see it. I'm looking for a picture of Victor on my screen here.
Victor Chen.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, ping me your email. I'll send you a free Audible code. Lots of good books.
Thanks.
Congratulations.
I have more. Do you want to know? But I will step away from the question asking because obviously my taste in entertainment is a little bit different than others. Let's actually, you know what? Let's do something different. Let's see. How about our friend Yarrow? Ask a question. You're here.
Oh God, put me on the spot.
Yeah.
I am not a sci-fi person. Oh man.
Could be Boston trivia.
Oh well, then yeah. Now you've gone even further away. Sorry, I'm a transplant. I grew up West Coast.
Give us West Coast trivia then.
West Coast trivia. All right. West Coast trivia. What's a good one on the West Coast? Maybe. Oh, here's one that I always ask about my home state. What percentage of Oregon is desert?
You know the answer, right?
Roughly speaking. 100%. Not quite. 10%. No. There you go. Daniel, you got it. It's about 2/3 desert.
Well, that is surprising.
All right.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah.
All right, I just private message you, Daniel. Send me your email. I'll send you your code.
Thank you.
Okay, and so just a general question, and maybe just shout out, what's more interesting as swag? You know, a $25 Amazon credit, a book credit. I've been trying to get us some certification test vouchers, but I'm not having a lot of luck with there.
Another possibility would be if there's some cloud-related vendors that we could, if there's something that was coveted, we could reach out and ask them if they would donate, because then they can splash the name and give them 60 seconds of sponsor time and get some interesting, whatever subscription it is to something. So let us know, right?
Yeah, in Slack.
We need feedback to make this thing better.
Okay, well, we're at what is often our stopping time. Anyone else have comments, observations, questions? Okay, well,
can I ask? Or just typing is taking too much time. So is the job announcement section over?